slip the surly bonds of earth and dance the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touch the face of God.
Hi, and welcome to the first installment of the Dad Project, a project 63 years in the making, a project that I had hoped to make in collaboration with my dad, a project that I hope would answer all the questions I had about his years as a pilot, and possibly tell me more about who my dad was. He rarely spoke about his time as a pilot, or anything for that matter. Most questions were answered with a shrug or a terse single-word response. When my son asked him what it was like to be a pilot and to fly, he said, "It was fun." Question answered. My sister tried questions by email. 3 emails in and he was done. Too much thinking, he said. I thought a camera would offer an intermediary a friendly face, but I never had the chance to do that. In his last couple of days, as he slowly began to check out, I had a brief chance to talk to him about his time as a pilot. He perked up. Life came back into his eyes. He remembered silly things like how noisy certain planes were and wondered why did they stick middies, interested in flying in the belly of a TBM COD during his summer cruise in 1955. Well, my dad died before I could ask him all the questions I had, so I'm now left the job of revealing my father through other means. I have his autobiography. I have his flight logs. The first entry was November 8th, 1957. And the last entry was December 10th, 1990, with 5,300 hours or so of very specific time spread out in between. My plan is to define my father through the planes he flew, from the first to the last, in that order. Let's begin by getting some particulars out of the way. My dad, Samuel N. Purvis III, soon to be known as Pete, was born on December 1st, 1934, in Cleveland, Ohio. He would grow up in Bay Village just outside Cleveland until he graduated high school, and would only go back after that to visit his parents, my grandparents, Sam and Myrtle. Following high school, he left for Hanover, New Hampshire on an ROTC scholarship to attend Dartmouth College, but his true destination was the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. He entered the academy following his freshman year at Dartmouth. These facts are easy, but there are so many questions, simple ones like, did he always want to be a pilot? I don't know. He wrote on the Grumman Memorial Park website that his introduction to planes and flying were the Cleveland air races, sitting on the roof of his father's 37 Ford. This was something he never related to me. Did he witness Bill Odom crash Jackie Cochran's P-51 in 1949? The crash that killed Odom and several family members on the ground? The crash that would end the air races in Cleveland? Maybe. Perhaps. He never said, at least to me. It would be a few years later at the Naval Academy that he would take his first flight in an airplane. The Naval Aircraft Factory N3N-3, affectionately known as the Yellow Peril, 1 for its color and 2 for having a penchant, like many yellow-colored military trainers, to kill or maim student pilots. First entering service in 1935, they came in 2 versions, one land-based, the other a float plane. Despite looking very much like a biplane from World War I, it was made of surplus aluminum from the canceled ZN airship project. All told, over 800 were made, A few of the N3N-3 float planes were transferred and stationed at North Severn at the boat basin, along with the Yard Patrol boats, YPs, used for midshipman sea training. For years, one of the N3Ns hung from the rafters of Dahlgren Hall until it was reclaimed by the Air and Space Museum in 2002. This sturdy yellow aircraft would be my father's indoctrination to flying while at the Academy, and his only time in a seaplane. His next opportunity to experience naval flying would be on his midshipman cruise on the USS Antietam CV-36. It was an Essex-class carrier that was completed too late to see action in World War II, but following its reactivation during the Korean conflict, it would become the first U.S. carrier modified with a true angled deck. He and several other middies were loaded in the bowels of a General Motors-built Grumman TBM COD and given a less than stellar introduction to the noises and smells of carrier operations. The TBM was one of the airplanes he told me was noisy. Very noisy, a rattletrap, he said. This was one of the several stalwart lines of Grumman products that would decorate U.S. carrier decks for years. The E-2 Hawkeye will be the last Grumman product in the Navy, while the C-2 Greyhound is being phased out by the CMV-22B Osprey tiltrotor. The Grumman TBF would be introduced to the public on December 7th, 1941, with the inadvertent but appropriate name of Avenger. It first saw service in the Battle of Midway when 6 of her number attacked the Japanese fleet, and only 5 would return. It went on to be far more successful and survivable as the war progressed, with adequate fighter coverage. It would be one of the many types of World War II aircraft that would be licensed and built by General Motors during the war, and not surprisingly, why you can't find a wartime Chevy sedan. It was a General Motors version of the Avenger, known as the TBM and not a TBF, that a 19-year-old George Bush would be shot down in during the war. The COD version, the TBM-3R, was modified to allow for 6 passengers and carry 3,000 pounds of cargo. This modification included removing the rear ball turret, the massive radio that sat between the pilot and the rear gunner, and the torpedo bay was reconfigured to carry the 3,000 pounds of cargo. In any case, this experience did not dissuade him from his desire to fly. To add to the story, his brother Scott had graduated from the Academy in 1953, and he also became a pilot. One of the questions I never had a chance to ask my dad was if he had talked to his brother about his flying experiences. My uncle's experience included a tour in VX-6. VX-6 had been specifically formed to support science and military operations in Antarctica. He flew RD-4s, Navy DC-3s, and de Havilland Otters while there. He also led the parachute search and rescue team and jumped while there. And he is the namesake of Purvis Peak, one of the numerous snow-covered mountains in the Antarctic. Or perhaps it was my dad's father, my grandfather's stories from his time serving in World War II that would be part of my father's desire to fly in the military. My grandfather was born in 1904 and was too young to serve in World War I, and that bothered him. And when he marched down to the recruiting station to enlist following Pearl Harbor, he was told he was too old, and that bothered him. He would try several more times to enlist with the same result, until finally the need for more warm bodies outstripped a disqualification because of his age. Accepted, he would become a 90-day wonder, and because of his age, came out the other side as a lieutenant. With orders in hand, he would report to one of the numerous jeep carriers in the Pacific during World War II. Like my father, my grandfather talked sparingly about his time in war. I asked him a few questions about it, and it was the last question that stopped any further questions. What was the scariest part of your experience? I asked him. Kamikazes, he said. Kamikazes, he said again, as his eyes glazed over as he looked to the ceiling of his apartment, and he drifted off. End of conversation. Maybe he shared more with my father, I'll never know, but it certainly didn't discourage my dad. So next up will be newly minted Ensign Purvis, Academy Class of 1957, receiving his orders to proceed to Pensacola, Florida for flight training, where he would fly the venerable T-34 Mentor and the T-28 Trojan. In any case, thanks for joining me for the first installment of the Dad Project. I am not selling anything or giving any instruction on how to do anything. I'm telling a story I was hoping my father would tell me. Now I'm trying to tell it for him. So please subscribe if you'd like to hear more, and hit the bell if you'd like to be sure to hear more. And I look forward to seeing and hearing from you in the second installment. So please join me then, and thanks for staying through this particular installment.